Hello, you're welcome along to the Matchbook Champions League podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Hussey, joined by the domestic duo of Mark O'Hare and Adrian Clarke. They've been in flying form in the domestic season, but also Champions League Matchday 2. Two great winners. We had the goals angles with Braga game for Mark O'Hare, who also very landed his long shot with Braga and both teams to score yes. So a man in form. But Adrian Clarke, there's something about an Asian handicap plus 2.25 goals that absolutely cruises in. So I don't know why I'm giving you the headline for this with Mark getting his long shot, but I am. I think I'm going to do it.
Yeah, I don't think I deserve the headline, but yeah, it was pretty a bit of an eye opener to some. Like, why are you back in Copenhagen against Bayern Munich? But it was just about got over the line. So yeah, no, it's good. I've enjoyed these two Champions League podcasts so far. Hopefully, we'll get a couple more winners today.
Yeah, it was both teams to score. Yes, Mark. I knew it was some sort of goals angle, but credit to you. Great start to the European action this season.
Yeah, I think I said it on the domestic pod as well. I've had a bit of luck, especially with the long shots landing in both Matchday 1 and Matchday 2. Goalkeeper scoring a stoppage time equaliser, and then Braga leaving it very, very late to win and undeservedly win away at Union Berlin. But we'll take it. I'm sure I have many sort of sad stories to tell you about losers throughout the campaign. So yeah, we'll start off with a flyer and fingers crossed we can continue it this midweek.
Sounds like a plan to me, guys. Matchbook insights for a full recap of all the guys' bets. We see they're being proven quite popular, so do check that out right up to the kickoff. Good time to give you a reminder, or if you don't get a chance to watch the podcast in full, to just give you a recap of all the guys' bets that have been put up. And if do hit that like button on the YouTube channel and subscribe completely for free, it's the easiest way to keep up to date with all the content we're putting out, not just football wise, but horse racing and NFL. The NFL guys are smashing it at the moment too. So 4 games we're going to cover, and pretty decent fixtures, I have to say. Galatasaray, Bayern Munich, Sevilla versus Arsenal, Newcastle, Dortmund, and PSG versus Milan. We'll start with Adrian wanted to give this game a little mention here. Galatasaray versus Bayern Munich. Early kickoff there, so a reminder on that Tuesday, 5:45. Galatasaray 7.4 on the match odds. Bayern Munich 1.48. The draw is available at 5.2. Both teams to score yes, 1.64 again. Another short price here. The Asian handicap line, Galatasaray again a bit less than Copenhagen at 1.25, and the total for this game is 3.5. 1.8 is the under there. So, Adrian, yeah, what have you sort of made of this new Bayern Munich under Harry Kane, I guess, for want of a better way of putting it? They were struggled against Copenhagen. I know we sort of expected that, but this is a big game, obviously, given Galatasaray's win at Old Trafford as well.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, that's why I picked it. Really, it was more a case of it's the winner really has got one foot in the knockout stages, so there's plenty to play for. Galatasaray will have been seen as minnows at the start, but obviously winning at Old Trafford, a few more eyes on them ahead of this fixture. Obviously 3-2, really, really exciting. And they're quite a fun team. They score a lot of goals. They're not exactly watertight at the back either, Galatasaray. So I think that this will be fun. Bayern Munich, I mean, they know how to score goals, don't they? I mean, it is remarkable. They've scored 30 goals in their last 10 games in all competitions, Bayern Munich. So they're averaging 3 a game. Harry Kane is just settled in beautifully, hasn't he? 10 goals and 5 assists already. I mean, that is just sensational, really. And you've got Leroy Sané, who's in great form, Kingsley Coman, and others. So they've got real firepower, Bayern Munich. They've got flaws. They're not the perfect side. They'll give up a few chances here and there, but they're good fun to watch. And Galatasaray, I think, in front of a passionate home crowd, will look to go for it. I did initially look at this and thought, well, Galatasaray at home in a tough environment, that's quite a good price, isn't it? You know, over 7 on them. But as I said to you before, don't like opposing Bayern Munich in the Champions League. It just doesn't really sit right with me. Not unless there's a massive handicap on it, because they are super consistent. They've only lost 2 away games in the Champions League by Munich since 2017. One was last season against Manchester City, and another was way back against Villarreal. So, yeah, they're very reliable, Bayern Munich, home and away in this competition. And when you're averaging 2 or 3 goals at least per game, it's hard to get beaten, isn't it? So that's why I'm going to side with them here. I think their minds will be focused because it's Galatasaray away. They know this is tough. They know that Galatasaray have just beaten Manchester United. They're rivals at the top of the group. I would imagine Thomas Tuchel and the players will be revved up for this one. And ultimately, I think they'll just be a little bit too good for Galatasaray, who've got that goal threat, we know, through Icardi, who's got 11 already this season. He's absolutely flying. But I can't go against Bayern Munich. Man City are the only team that have had more shots than Bayern in the Champions League so far this season. I think they'll win the game. And I'm pretty confident, actually, that there'll be over 2.5 goals in this match. I'll be staggered if there are 2 goals or fewer come the final whistle. So, yeah, Bayern to win and over 2.5.
Okay, Bayern over 2.5, as Adrian alluded to, 1.94. And something I completely forgot to mention is Galatasaray at the start. Adrian being your best long shot at Old Trafford. We're getting a bit of Adrian's lost the plot on the YouTube comments.
Yeah, I did, didn't I? On that, there's one more stat that I wanted to chuck in. Every Bayern Munich game this season, over 2.5 goals. So,
well,
that's quite a strong stat, yeah.
Well, just on that, I wanted to bring that back to the domestic form in particular, Mark. You might look at the table, 3rd place, without looking at the points, obviously. They're doing pretty decent and around their average. It's just a case of there's 3 other teams trying to keep tabs with them. But I presume you're expecting a relatively comfortable Bundesliga title leading into a potential Champions League charge at the end of the season with Harry Kane.
Yeah, I still think they're very, very strong favourites to win the Bundesliga title. Leverkusen and Leipzig probably the realistic challengers this time around. But what Bayern are doing in the autumn tends to be kind of just make weight, really. They come to the fore just like Man City do in the spring, and when titles are on the line, really. So they're staying. They've started relatively well. They've not been the same sort of Bayern juggernaut of yesteryear, really. We've talked about it from the outset, really, that this is a team still missing a few key ingredients, a couple of injuries as well in the camp too. And Thomas Tuchel is very eager to tell everyone who will listen to him any opportunity that his side is missing a holding midfielder. He wasn't happy with a few defensive departures as well in the window, which weren't kind of followed up with some signings. So I would expect Bayern to rectify things in January. I'd also expect them to be much better come February, March, April time. They're still hugely talented, especially in possession. Yet they are flawed. We can see they are vulnerable at times as well. I think the Matchday 1 game against Man United was quite strange, really, because they were completely in control of that game without ever coming close to kind of hitting top gear. They still managed to concede 3 goals and had the game in the balance at times. So the performance in Copenhagen was probably a little bit more alarming, just because they toiled for a long time against that low block, fell behind and had to sort of scramble back in the last half hour. But I think this match will be different because it's Galatasaray in Istanbul and they'll fancy their chances, as they tend to do. So they'll be a bit more open, a bit more adventurous, and that tends to play into Bayern's hands. So I agree with Adrian. I believe Bayern will win this game. I also believe there'll be at least 3 goals. But it feels strange me saying this, but I'm the one kind of being the more bolder of the two by taking Bayern to win a BTTS at 274. Reason being, Adrian's selection is absolutely fair enough, and the price is very nice indeed. To see that land, you can obviously get Bayern to win 3-0, 4-0, 5-0, etc. But most likely, I think, is Galatasaray getting on the score sheet. Bayern have conceded in 8 of their 11 games across Super Cup, Bundesliga, and the Champions League. Their last away clean sheet, and their only away clean sheet this year, came against Bremen on Matchday 1 of the Bundesliga campaign. And as I say, I think this game will suit them a little bit better. But I don't rate Galatasaray particularly highly, regardless of what they did at Old Trafford. I know people are quick to sort of point out the collection of kind of relatable players in their squad. But go back to Matchday 1, we saw them wet the bed against Copenhagen when they're in a really strong position. And then I thought they were easily second best in that first 20 minutes at Old Trafford. It's just United's defence decided to go AWOL, and then suddenly they sort of lost the plot themselves, and Galatasaray kind of thrived. But if you look at that defence and midfield, it's hugely inferior to what Bayern can offer, and that's supposedly Bayern's weakness. Clearly going forward, you've got players of promise with Zaha, Tete, Mertens, the Turkish lad Akter Akoglu, who played really well at Old Trafford too. But Icardi is really the only elite level player there who's played at this level for a long time and has still got it, really. So I still expect them to cause Bayern problems, because most teams have caused Bayern problems this season. But I just think they're going to be they're just not on the same level as Bayern Munich, even if Bayern turn up in third or fourth gear. So, and Adrian's mentioned their numbers in Europe, but away from home in the group stage, they're unbeaten in 18, which is a competition record. They've won 16 of those 18 away group stage games, which is astonishingly strong. So, yeah, I think the increase in Bayern just to win at 148 to 274 by including BTTS is too big to turn down, really. And if you want to be even more sort of sensible or pragmatic, just Bayern -1.25. Because I do believe they will score at least twice in this match, potentially 3, maybe 4. But I just fancy Galatasaray to get on the score sheet too.
Okay, Bayern, both teams to score. Yes, Mark's pick at 274. I'm going to go in for the safe selection and Adrian, Bayern and over 2.5 goals, 194, just to cover that win to nil. But pro Bayern Munich here from both the guys in the early kickoff on Tuesday. Beware the early kickoff, even on Champions League nights. Sevilla versus Arsenal, Tuesday, 8 o'clock. This is a pretty big game for Arsenal at the moment, considering their last results. Sevilla 4.5, Arsenal 188, the draw 395. Both teams to score, yes. 179 is the favorite in that market. The Asian handicap line sees Sevilla get a half a goal head start at over even money 2.12, and the goal line here is 2.5 at 185 is currently the over. So look, Mark, we'll get your thoughts on the game on Saturday just from watching the game and on the eye test. I thought it was not a great performance from Arsenal and a slightly worrying sign, albeit great character to get a 2-2 result.
Yeah, it's wasn't a great game, was it? Yeah. Chelsea obviously got themselves into a really strong position. A great finish from Mudryk, and you can question David Reyes.
Great fluky finish was that?
No way he meant that, Mark. No.
I think he meant
it. Quotes, Mark. Make the case.
I saw him. I haven't seen the quotes from him, so I might be wrong. But I just looking at him, I watching the replay, I saw him sort of look up, and I thought he meant it. Maybe I'm wrong, but even still, David Reyes, poor positioning. Really, I know he's trying to sort of. I know what he's trying to do, but even still, it just kind of shows his lack of composure, his lack of. I don't know. There's something about him at the minute. He's looked really nervous, not just shot stopping, but nervous in possession as well. And I think if Arsenal do switch out goalkeepers again for this competition, then perhaps they'll look a bit more assured of Ramsdale between the sticks. I know his wife gave birth at the weekend. That's why he was unavailable, but he should be back available, I assume, for this game. But yeah, it wasn't a great performance, particularly after sort of trying to back up what they did against Manchester City, which we talked about previously being an odd kind of game as well. But I think Arsenal have been strong operators on their travels for a long time now. To manage to claw their way back in and pick up that point on Saturday will be seen as a positive, despite that slow start. It was a difficult game immediately after an international break. So you've got to try and take the positives in these kind of situations. We did see that improvement in the second half. Arteta said he made a few tinkering options at half time and certainly got a reaction from that. But overall, I think if you took 4 points out of the game against Man City at home and Chelsea away, you have to be pleased with that. So, yeah, this is an interesting game. I haven't got a major view on this fixture. I think it is quite tricky. What I do think is quite interesting is Arsenal are a similar or slightly bigger price than Real Madrid were for their trip to Sevilla on Saturday, which was actually quite an entertaining 1-1 draw where both sides created plenty. You can really see Sevilla raising their game for matches against Real Madrid as they tend to, but can they kind of follow that up against Arsenal in what is a bigger game for Sevilla than it is really for Arsenal, because their Champions League campaign hasn't been hugely encouraging. Successive draws, and they were second best in both of those matches. They were well favoured at home against Lens on Matchday 1, didn't turn up, managed to pinch a point then at PSV despite being outplayed. They gave up 18 shots in the box in that away game and 8 shots on target. So they've obviously made a managerial change since then. The former Uruguayan head coach Diego Alonso came in for the Madrid game, switched it from 4-2-3-1 to a 4-3-3. I liked the balance of the team at the weekend. Just still feel there's a bit of vulnerability about them too. If you look at their defence, Acuna and Navas at fullback, Ramos and Gudelli at centre half, Nyland between the sticks. They'll be physical, they'll be feisty, they'll look to kind of press Arsenal and impose their physicality upon them. They'll also hope for the atmosphere to intimidate Arsenal, as it seemed to do when they went to Lens. Whether that was complacency or not, I'm not quite sure. But yeah, I found this one tricky to try and find a best bet I really want to hang my hat on. I've opted for under 2.5 goals at 2.16, just because it's a bigger price than back in Sevilla plus half a goal. And I think if Sevilla are going to get out of this match with something, it's unlikely to be a high-scoring fixture. I don't see it being a 2-2 or a 2-1, 3-1 win to Sevilla. So, if you look at the non-penalty expected goals of what am I looking at? I've completely lost my notes, so ignore that. But what I was going to say is I just think Sevilla will be looking to try and keep this fairly close, fairly competitive. They'll know that a point in this fixture is a good result, and I think Arsenal will feel the same, considering they turn around and host Sevilla in a fortnight's time or 3 weeks, whenever it is, really. So tough betting heat, in my opinion. So kind of happy to back the unders and odds against price.
Yeah, the comments where Mudryk said the Chelsea goalkeeper coach identified Raya would always be off his line, which I don't doubt is true that he did. I just don't think he meant that cross whatsoever. I know Adrian agrees on that. Adrian, I want to throw a slight concern chant a few Arsenal fans. At the start of the season, they had a big Champions League away night with a crowd and an atmosphere. I remember hearing that little small bit of talk, didn't really believe it. Watching the Lens game, that's all I thought about once that first goal went in. Is there a slight question mark on this Arsenal team on a big Champions League away night in an atmosphere like Sevilla and Lens? You probably won't get as good an atmosphere as those two clubs, that they may go into their shell a little bit.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, Arsenal are much, much better away from home than they have been in years and years. I don't think they're fazed by the atmosphere as such. It was pretty hostile in Lens, but I would actually say it's more of a stylistic thing with the opponents. Arsenal struggled with really aggressive opponents. Lens were super hostile, weren't they? They really steamed into Arsenal, and it caused them a few problems. Chelsea in that first half, really, really aggressive, and it caused Arsenal issues. So I think that more than the atmosphere is something that would concern me. And Sevilla, rest assured, Sevilla they'll be belligerent. They'll get stuck in. Under Uruguayan head coach Diego Alonso, that new manager bounce. They'll be running harder than they were for the previous coach. I've got no doubt about that. And I think there'll be a lot of fouls in the game. I think it'll be quite bitty. So yeah, this is a tough game for Arsenal. And Raya has looked nervous. I don't buy into the talk that he's having a nightmare. I just don't think that's the case. I just think he looks a little bit edgy. We'll see. We'll see over the long term who gets the nod. I doubt Ramsdale will come straight back in for this game, but it would be a popular pick if Mikel Arteta did go for that. So I think a lot of Arsenal fans are keen to see him. I too think it's a hard game to call. I really see both teams scoring. I know that Arsenal had a lot of clean sheets away from home, but the Chelsea game, the Lens game, a few doubts are creeping into my mind, especially, around the physicality of opponents. And you look at the numbers as well. So, Sevilla have scored in 14 successive home games. And they've just sacked their manager, but almost always score at home. 14 home games in a row is decent. Sevilla don't keep very many clean sheets, or they certainly didn't under the previous guy. Didn't at the weekend against Real Madrid, even though that's a good result. They've conceded in 7 of their last home games. So based on that, you'd say that BTTS is likely. And look, this is Arsenal, and Arsenal score in pretty much every game that they play. You have to go all the way back to, don't even think about it, Nottingham Forest away at the back end of last season. It's the last time Arsenal failed to score in a match, full stop. So, that's a long period. So I would back Arsenal to go there a notch, but I don't feel fully confident in Arsenal defensively at the moment, and Sevilla will take it to them at times. I'm absolutely sure of that. So yeah, I think that Arsenal can win the game, but it wouldn't surprise me at all if this is a score draw. In which case both teams to score is covered. So yeah, that was my pick. It's harder and harder to get both teams to score at a reasonable price this season. So this is just about backable, isn't it? 1.79, and I can see it.
Yeah, I'm inclined to lean towards both teams to score. Yes, 179, as Adrian said, but take Mark's point on this being a tough enough betting heat. But that's the second selection. We'll run up a Matchbook multiple from the 4 main games if we can here. So we'll go to the Wednesday game. Go to you first, Adrian. Just a quick look at the betting here. Newcastle versus Dortmund. I mean, as big a night as ever, that last game at St. James's Park. Newcastle 177. Dortmund 5.0. The draw is 4.1. Both teams to score, yes, available at 177. Dortmund are getting a 3/4 of a goal head start at above even money on the Asian handicap as we record Monday afternoon, and the goal line is 2.5. 176 is the over. So, look, Adrian, my only question to you is: can Newcastle somehow top that atmosphere from the PSG game, because it was absolutely electric? As good an atmosphere in England anyway as you're going to get on a European night.
Yeah, no, I don't think you can. I mean,
You can't, like, yeah.
it was one for the ages, wasn't it? And to absolutely obliterate PSG the way they did, it's just unforgettable, and it made all those seasons of struggle where they, in relegation battles, kind of almost feel worth it. Where you see how far the team has come, and they're in form, aren't they? You've got to say they're in real good form this season. The atmosphere is always lively at St James's Park. I can't see it being quite as good as that PSG game, but it still be pretty noisy for the visitors. And the team love playing there, don't they? 6 wins at home this season, and the only one they didn't win was when Liverpool did the late smash and grab, if you remember. Darwin Nunez off the bench nicked it with 2 late goals. If that hadn't happened, that they'd be flawless at home this season. So yeah, they're worthy favourites, no doubt about that. And I don't want to oppose them. They've beaten PSG 4-1. They've just beaten Palace 4-0. They took Guimaraes and Trippier off pretty early at the weekend. Almiron and Isak were rested and rotated on the bench. So 4 or 5 players are going to be feeling quite fresh, I think, coming into the game as well. And you look at Dortmund, and Dortmund don't lose very many games. Their only loss this season was at PSG. So they're quite hard to beat this season. But I would worry about their pace at the back with Hummels and Süle, guys like that, up against an Isak or a Wilson or a Gordon when he runs inside. So, yeah, Newcastle should win this game. I just don't think it's going to be another rout. I think that Dortmund drew 0-0 with Milan. They only lost 2-0 at PSG. And yeah, even though they don't get that many clean sheets, they don't concede multiple goals that often, Borussia Dortmund, which is why they've only lost once this season. So that when they concede, they only tend to concede 1 or 2 at the most. So yeah, I think this would be a slightly calmer affair, less goals, but still Newcastle to have the edge. I can't tip against them, not the form that they're in. So yeah, Newcastle and under 4.5 for me, and it's a nice looking price actually. 2.22. They're boosted nicely. Just got to avoid another 4-1 or a 5-0, haven't we?
Yeah, if it's 4-0 with a minute to go, Adrian, it could be a squeaky bum time. It does seem a decent jump though, 2.22. And Mark, I guess in betting, it's important to constantly be updating thoughts on teams. And I guess we were overall on the podcast pro PSG going into the Newcastle game. Now the market's definitely swung, and Newcastle are getting shorter and shorter against Dortmund. But it's also, I guess, important to say, is this still a backable price, even if it is shortened? And you seem to think 177 is quite decent.
Yeah, I'm all in on Newcastle this week. I'm very positive on their prospects. I got them totally wrong on Matchday 2. I thought they were far too short against PSG, but they were dominant. I do believe they were given a quite a helping hand really from PSG and Luis Enrique with that really bizarre tactical approach of playing 4-2-4 at St James's Park and being reluctant to change things when obviously things weren't working. But Newcastle was smart. They were efficient, clinical, fully deserving of an easy win really in the end. And, a tremendous performance, which was night and day away from what we saw on Matchday 1 at San Siro when they were very lucky to escape with a point. And I think domestically now they're starting to reach last season's heights quite consistently. Has been a few hiccups along the way, mostly against the elite opponents they faced, but on the whole they're moving very much in the right direction. Steamrolling Palace at the weekend was very impressive, 5th in the Premier League. But if you look at the underlying metrics, Newcastle have been the strongest team in the Premier League this season, according to expected goals supremacy. They're also generating the highest XG figures in the division, and at St James's Park, those figures are enhanced even further. So, yeah, I'm quite happy with the price. They went off at 240 when they hosted PSG, and PSG themselves were about 1.76 when they welcomed Dortmund, and they won that game relatively comfortably in the end. Dortmund started okay, but didn't really pack a punch at all, and then the penalty awarded kind of took the game away from them, and they were just never really at the races and failed to trouble PSG that day. And that was PSG very much in the the early stages of Luis Enrique's tenure as well. So this is a difficult contest, I think, for Dortmund, a team who I've not been particularly fond of at all this season. I know they're unbeaten in the Bundesliga, but they beat Bremen 1-0 at the weekend or Friday night, and that scoreline probably didn't reflect how good they were in that game. They were quite dominant, but Bremen are a bottom half team. And actually, if you look at their total Bundesliga record, there's a lot of those wins or even draws, which have probably been a little bit kinder than perhaps the balance of play suggested. And Edin Terzic is trying to make them a little bit less chaotic, a bit more controlled. So the goal output has kind of decreased a little bit, and they are starting to keep a couple more clean sheets. And they're being a bit more competitive in matches where you expect them to be a bit more loose. But I just think if Newcastle come close, anywhere close to those standards they set against PSG, they should be winning this fixture. And I think the price is nice enough. I wouldn't be too surprised to see that contract a bit further as it did against PSG after we spoke.
Yeah, Wednesday night again is this kickoff here. So a bit of time, but 36 hours for the market to move. 177 at time recording for Mark, and we will lock that in as the podcast bet. But if you do want to boost that price up, add the under 4.5 goals, even with Dortmund's defensive approach, is a nice boost at 222. PSG versus Milan. We're 6-0 from covering games from this group. We make no apologies for. PSG are 182, Milan 4.7. The draw is available at 4.0. Both teams to score yes. Again, is the favourite in this market at 175. The Asian handicap line sees Milan get 3/4 of a goal head start at 1.91. And the goal line here, overs, is 2.5 at 178. So Mark, taking away on this game, we spoke with PSG and you mentioned the approach at St. James's Park. I guess you're expecting a more solid performance, and they could play similarly enough, but the fact they're home here against a weaker opposition means they probably should get the win.
Yeah, should, but
should. You're not as keen as I thought.
Yeah, I am to a certain degree, but it's hard to, you've got best laid plans and all that, and then Luis Enrique puts the team sheets in, and I knew immediately as soon as I saw the teams at St. James's Park, I was in trouble in that game. To go 4-2-4 away at Clermont on the weekend before the game against Newcastle is acceptable, but to do it away at Newcastle really wasn't. And a very strange and baffling decision from Luis Enrique, a coach who I hold in high esteem. But I expect them to be better, much better, because they are at the Parc des Princes. But also in the game since, he's used a 4-3-3 in a 4-4-2 and had decent success doing both. Most impressive, I think, was the 3-1 win away at Rennes before the international break, where they generated 3.5 expected goals in that fixture. They looked fluent, confident, and comfortable, really, with Mbappe and Dembele on the flanks and Ramos through the middle. At the weekend, they played Strasbourg. Weren't as eye-catching, but then Strasbourg are probably one of the most kind of stubborn and defensive sides in the division. They went there to try and low block, try and pick up a point where they could, and PSG found a way and ended up winning quite comfortably. So I don't think Milan will be quite as defensively minded, but they will be pretty hell-bent on trying to pick up something. So I do expect a pragmatism from a Milan perspective. Their most recent matches have been quite tight affairs. Of course, they were squeezed out by Juventus on Sunday night with Malik Thiaw being sent off before half-time. They were kind of handicapped a little bit before the game with suspensions to Mike Maignan and Theo Hernandez. Ruben Loftus-Cheek is injured as well. But Maignan, Theo and Thiaw will all be available here, which will give them a bit of a boost. They've just been a bit flat going forward for quite a while now, despite kind of having quite a nice range of attacking options. Things aren't really clicking in the final third, and it tends to be a kind of give it to Leao and just hope he can produce something magic, because it's been quite ordinary. Kind of going back to a decent home win against Lazio, they've managed just one goal in the last 3 games. They haven't really conjured up a huge amount. They were the better team at Dortmund on Matchday 2, but failed to make their pressure count. And PSG in Paris on the Champions League night, it's a very tough assignment. So the hosts have only lost once in 34 home group stage games now, 27 wins in that sample. And more recently, they've won 8 of 9 home games in this competition too. So, I think PSG should win this fixture. And kind of following what Adrian did in the previous game, I'm going to include under 4.5 goals to give us a boost to 226, just because I don't believe Milan will allow themselves to engage into a shootout here. And PSG under Luis Enrique are much more controlled, much more possession heavy, and that tends to sort of lead itself towards kind of lower scoring fixtures too. Okay,
and Adrian, you're essentially the complete opposite to Mark from the last one. You're going to take PSG in the nose here.
Yeah, just on the nose, although I think that's a pretty good bet. I do. I can't see there being more than 4 goals in this one. Milan have been, fairly tight, haven't they? They haven't been full of goals. Yeah, maybe they're asking a bit too much of Olivier Giroud. It does feel as if, there's a lot that rests on Rafael's shoulders. Pulisic's a good player, isn't he? But at this level against the PSG, is he really going to be that match winner for Milan? Is he going to cause them that many problems for PSG? I'm not sure. 2 goalless draws, obviously, so far for the Italians. I can't see them holding PSG at bay at the Parc des Princes, not with the options that they've got available, obviously Mbappe and Gonzalo Ramos. Maybe we'll probably see Kolo Muani in this one as well. They've got a lot of quality going forward, haven't they? I know that they had a stinker at St James's, but as Mark's outlined, the form line at home in the Champions League is pretty untouchable. And look, in the last 3 home games, full stop, in all competitions, they haven't let in a goal. They've won all 3 games, PSG. So they've played pretty sensibly. They haven't let things get wild and out of control. I did look at PSG to win with a clean sheet. That leaps the price to 3.4, which is quite appealing. But just to play on the safe side, I'm happy to go on the nose here. I just feel that Milan are a good, solid team that can hold them at bay for the most part. But ultimately, I just don't think they've got enough firepower to hurt the French side. And I think that Mbappe and co will find a way to get the win that they need, because they're under a little bit of pressure as well. This is a big game for PSG, and I don't see them fluffing their line. So I'm going for them on the nose, but I do think that Mark's pick's a really good one, because I wouldn't see more than 4 goals in the game.
Okay, depending what sort of punter you are, we're going to play it safe on the podcast with PSG, but you can, again, link them in with under 4.5 goals. So that's PSG, Newcastle, both teams to score in Sevilla, Arsenal, and Bayern Munich and over 2.5 goals. If you want to do a multiple on the Matchbook betting exchange and insights.matchbook.com, if you want to recap of those bets and also the bets being put up now. And Mark, one of the games that was probably unlucky to miss the 4 is Celtic versus Atletico Madrid. And so Celtic have been as good as ever in terms of results anyway in domestically. I know their fans aren't overall happy with how they're playing. And I guess that's sort of feeding into your selection here, because Atletico are above even money, 2.02, and you think that's a good bet.
I do. Very, very strange drift on Atletico since the opening show, when they were about 1.8 or even shorter than that to go out to sort of odds against or even money at least. It's quite a big drift, and struggling to kind of work out why that might be, because for me, Atletico Madrid at even money or better away at Celtic is a very attractive proposition. Celtic were unfortunate on Matchday 2 against Lazio. They were slightly the better side and probably created slightly better chances. They thought they'd won it until VAR intervened, and then to go on to lose that game was very disappointing, especially after the way in which the final game went. Well, they were in the battle really until they conceded a direct free kick on half time, and then the second half things escalated. The red cards played a part, and it's an enormous task now for Celtic to try and qualify from this group or even get Europa League football with home and away games against Atletico, the toughest team in the group. So, after a slow start, they are starting to click a bit more into gear under Brendan Rodgers, but his European record is very, very sketchy. And it's fair to say that Celtic aren't the same side they were 12 months ago under Postecoglou either. So, last year under Postecoglou, they were beaten at home by Real Madrid and Leipzig, despite playing pretty well in both games. But interestingly, Leipzig went off at a very similar price to what Atletico are this midweek. And I think if you kind of put the two clubs together, last season's Leipzig, this season's Atletico, are Atleti better, worse, about the same? You couldn't say they're worse than Leipzig anyway. So I think price-wise, we're onto something quite nice here. And yeah, Celtic, you kind of assume or you kind of presume that Parkhead is a fortress, a really intimidating ground on the European circuit. Well, that's not been the case now for quite some time, especially in the group stage. Celtic have been losing fixtures at home in the Champions League quite regularly in this competition, at this stage of the competition. So you're coming up against the third best team in Spain. Griezmann and Morata are in exceptional form together. This team are starting to win games consistently. The transition towards a more attack-minded side is bearing fruit. They still have that old dog in them, but they're certainly not the sort of dogged defensive side that they used to be. And I think that adventure, that abandon will give them a good opportunity to get some points on the board at Celtic here as well. So the only negative I can find about Atleti and that potential drift is their first 2 Champions League games. They have underwhelmed. They haven't been great on the underlying metrics, but I just think man for man, club for club, Atleti are in a different hemisphere really to Celtic at the minute. So I think even money on the away win is very appealing.
Yeah, I was going to push it if you had any sort of idea on the drift, but you just sort of alluded to it. It may be those first couple of games, Mark, and the slight underperformance in the underlying metrics then.
Yeah, that's the only thing I can put it towards. There has been some injuries in Atleti's camp for quite some time. I think Samuel Lino is the latest to be injured, but they've got a big squad, bigger than Real Madrid's and Barcelona's. And if you look at the players in reserve, or you look at the proposed starting 11, it's still more than good enough. You've got some outstanding individuals in midfield. The defence is, still physical, aggressive, and capable of keeping teams out. And up front, you've got one of the best players in the world alongside a Morata who's scoring goals and looking confident. So, combine it with Celtic really, and it's chalk and cheese.
Okay, so Atletico 2.02 at the time of recording. Interesting where that market finishes up. Mark, we'll go to Europa League action here. Brighton and both teams score yes is a staple diet if Brighton are up against an inferior opposition. I watched the Manchester City Brighton game, and for 60 minutes Brighton weren't really in the game, but I thought that last 20-25 minutes they were the only team that looked like scoring that equalizer. So I guess it's all feeding into this bet here against Ajax.
Yeah, it was quite an underwhelming match, really, considering the build up towards it. Really, if you look at the expected goals, Brighton actually won it at the Etihad, which is a bit of a surprise. But they're starting to, that was the first game this season across the Premier League and the Europa League that Brighton matches failed to feature at least 4 goals. Over 2.5 goals has landed in every game. They lost that game. It's now just 1 win in 6 across all competitions, 4 defeats in that sample. They haven't been anywhere near their best in Europe either. A 3-2 defeat to AEK and then a 2-2 draw at Marseille when they just didn't turn up for the first half hour or so. And De Zerbi has talked about struggling to kind of juggle both competitions with injuries and rotation. The injuries have certainly started to bite with Stupinian missing, now Solly March, Welbeck, Lamptey. So they're going to struggle a little bit at left back for the next couple of weeks. But you just know Brighton will be front foot. It's the Brighton way. They do pack a punch. The metrics going forward, whether it's just raw goals or chances created, are exceptional. Really, league leading best since De Zerbi came in. So I'd be very surprised if they failed to trouble the score sheet at least a couple of times here against an Ajax team who are just in the mud. It's absolutely catastrophic what's happened at that club, to be in such a strong position of dominance in that domestic league, to be the disaster case they are at the minute. It's quite shocking. We'll probably never ever see Ajax at this kind of low ebb ever again, really. Winless since the opening day in the Eredivisie, 5 straight defeats, their worst ever start. Lost at rock bottom Utrecht on Sunday. Total embarrassment at the minute that club is, and it's reflected in the prices. Brighton have just 1.34 to beat Ajax, which is kind of just astonishing. You'll never see that again. You take a screenshot, remember the day, Brighton fans, because 134 at home to Ajax. But they should win this game because Ajax are just a basket case at the minute. They're conceding goals, conceding chances on and off the field. They're in all sorts of bother. However, they do have players of ability still, and I think Brighton's kind of cavalier, adventurous approach does lend itself to goal-heavy games, as we say, every week, really. So I wouldn't back Brighton to keep a clean sheet against anyone. So I think Ajax have played out score draws twice already in the competition. So backing Brighton to win and both teams to score boosts that Brighton price from 134 to 260, and that's good enough for me. I think that's a really nice price to cheer on Thursday night.
Yeah, I'm very fascinated to see where Brighton's season ends up at the end, like how they got on in Europa, where they finished in the Premier League. Is this amount of goals sustainable? Who knows? But that's locked in. Brighton both teams to score yes versus Ajax, 2.6 currently. Adrian, another selection from Europa League for you as well. It's Jose Mourinho's Roma.
Yeah, I found the Champions League card a little bit tricky this week. I've got to say, even outside of the matches that we've discussed already, there wasn't anything leaping off the page. And I looked through the card in the Europa League and just saw Roma at home at the Stadio Olimpico at a backable price, just on the nose, 1.81 to beat Slavia Prague. Now, I think if you asked 100 people who you thought would win this game, well into the 90s would say, well, Roma will win this game. So yeah, I think it's a good price. I don't know if Slavia are being sort of overrated in the market because of their start in the Europa League, which has been really good. They won 2-0 in Servette and smashed Sheriff 6-0 at home. So they're flying in the competition. They are unbeaten domestically as well. But I looked at the qualifiers. in the away games, they drew one of them, they lost the other, and this is Slavia Prague up against Roma, and Roma are led by Jose Mourinho, who loves a cup competition. We know that, takes them very, very seriously, and they've still got an awful lot of good players at his disposal. They're not flying, they're not in brilliant form. I think they only narrowly won at the weekend, but since they were humbled by Genoa at the end of September, they've won 4 on the spin. They've kept a few clean sheets, and their record in the Europa League at home at the Stadio Olimpico, which is a tough place to go as a visiting team, is 8 wins from the last 9 games. So, yeah, I just think that they're highly likely to beat Slavia Prague again and effectively book their place in the knockout stages with a little bit of room to spare. And that, of course, is the aim of the game for Jose Mourinho as he looks to sort of push for a Champions League spot in Serie A. He'd like to get this qualification in what looks a really easy group, done and dusted, nice and quickly. And I'd be surprised if they didn't win this game comfortably.
Okay, Roma currently priced at 181 on Matchbook at time of recording. And we'll go to our best long shot section. 3 wins, 3 defeats on the Champions League podcast so far. £20 stake on each means you'd be up plus £347.68. I wish I was backing £20 stakes on the best long shots this year, that's for sure. Adrian, we'll stick to you. There's a game we covered, and this will fit in nicely with Mark's on the game itself, but it's PSG Milan, and 1-0 a correct score you think is overpriced.
Yeah, I was looking at it, and obviously Milan have not scored in the Champions League this season. Didn't score at the weekend, did they? Lost 1-0 at home to Juventus. They're struggling a little bit for goals, but they are pretty sound defensively. And I think they will look to frustrate PSG at the Parc des Princes, but ultimately I don't think they'll be able to hold out. Yeah, I'm looking at the PSG's home form, a lot of clean sheet wins, but not too many hammerings in there of late. They've just been efficient, getting the job done. And there'll be nerves because they've just been battered by Newcastle. They need the win. They can ill afford to lose this game. That would put Enrique in a really tight spot. So I don't think PSG are going to come at this maybe with that 4-2-4 and really go gung-ho. I think they will be patient enough. And yeah, of all the score lines, I just thought, I'll have a look. PSG 1, AC Milan 0. That feels about right. And 9.6. I thought that's a good long shot shout.
Okay, 9.6 at time of recording. And Mark, Adrian touched on it was a tough week in terms of looking at the Champions League card. You have managed to find a bet outside the games we've covered in the long shot section, and it's Lazio on both teams to score 7.2 away to Feyenoord.
Yeah, I'm just surprised that Feyenoord are odds-on favourites to win this match. The market therefore suggesting the Dutch champions would be fair favourites as a neutral venue between the two teams. And look, I know they've been in great form again this season. They're very good going forward, great chances, score goals. They were good. They were quite unlucky not to get something against Atletico on Matchday 2, but that's a very short price for an Eredivisie club against a Serie A club. And look, Lazio haven't been anywhere close to their best compared to last term, but they have still managed to scrape 4 points from matches against Atleti and away at Celtic. They've shown signs of recovery domestically recently too, with 3 wins from 4. Including a 2-0 win away at Sassuolo, who did give them a helping hand, it should be said. But my numbers make Feyenoord around a sort of 235, 240 shot for this. And I was very tempted to include this match in our best other bets section and back Lazio plus half a goal. In the long shot section, I would have liked to have backed Lazio at 4.0 as my standout selection. But to get into range, I've just kind of included BTTS as well, which gives us a massive leap to 7.2 because Feyenoord fixtures are rarely dull. They will probably score in this game. Lazio have only managed 2 clean sheets all season. De Kuip will be lively, shall we say, before the game and during the match. It will be a great atmosphere. And I'm sure it'll be quite a watchable affair too. But I think Feyenoord will go for the jugular. And I just think Lazio are quite smart and streetwise in their approach. And they might be too smart for Feyenoord, really. And I just think that price is a bit offensive, really, to Lazio to be a 3-1 shot away at Feyenoord. So I'd be kind of keen to get them on side in any market I could. But for this segment, I'll back the 7.2 shots of Lazio to win and BTTS.
Mark may be under constraints of trying to find a long shot under 5 or over 5.0, but dear listener, you are not under constraint. If you do want to take what Mark wants in this match, Lazio to win, it's a safe option of 4.0. However, public with both teams to score, yes, that is quite a decent boost at 7.2. The best luck to both of you on the long shot sections. These two best bets have already been covered in the podcast. You could sort of have a guess of where the guys, based on the case they've made, 4 and 2, the best bets records on the Champions League pod, incidentally. Saying £20 stake, you'd be up plus 22. That includes the 2% commission. Mark, we'll stick with you and take it away on. I'll let you tell the listeners what you're going for this week.
Yeah, Newcastle against them on Matchday 2, but very much with them on Matchday 3. I got the PSG game very wrong, but they are the highest rated team in the Premier League this season. That's despite playing Man City, Liverpool, Brighton and Aston Villa already. They haven't had it easy in the Premier League, but they've been pretty impressive and pretty dominant for the most part. And if they come close to the standards they set against PSG, I feel they'll be too strong for a Dortmund side who still seem to be searching for their identity after last season. They haven't scored yet in the Champions League, beaten 2-0 at PSG, and then was second best at home to Milan. Quite fortunate to escape with a point from that fixture too. If they don't improve, I think Newcastle should be getting all 3 points in this match, and I'll happily to back them at 177.
Okay, Newcastle 177 at time recording. Adrian, it's the early kickoff on Tuesday, so take it away. You're going to get rid of the curse once and for all.
We're just going to get straight in there, and go for Bayern Munich to beat Galatasaray and over 2.5 goals to be scored in the game. Look, Galatasaray have been involved in a couple of really good games so far, 2-2 with Copenhagen, 3-2 winners at Manchester United. But Bayern Munich are the best team in the group. They are the class acts, and they've got a phenomenal record in the Champions League group stages, haven't they? And as I said earlier, since 2017, they've lost twice away from home in the Champions League. You know, they've gone to some really difficult places over and over and over again and not been beaten. And they've won a lot of those games as well. So I think they're more than good enough to go to Istanbul and to win. Kane's in great form. We know that 10 goals, 5 assists. Sane, Coman too. But yeah, the numbers are huge. Bayern always score and always seem to score multiple goals. 30 in their last 10 matches in all competitions. And every single match that Bayern have been involved in this season has seen over 2.5 goals land. So yeah, when you combine that, and it does feel as if it will be over 2.5 goals, combine that with a Bayern win, which is clearly the most likely in the market, we can bump it up to 1.94, which does the job for me.
Okay, for what it's worth, I do like those two best bets, so we will see how they get on. My thanks to Mark and Adrian. We will be back as a 3 on Thursday morning to cover the next round of the Premier League action. Good to have the Premier League and Champions League back in full swing before the next international break. Insights.matchbook.com, full recap of all the guys' picks, and do check out our YouTube channel. Subscribe completely for free, turn on notifications, and you'll never miss when we go live. Until then, please gamble responsibly. Enjoy the week's football, and we will chat to you Thursday morning. Bye-bye.